The times I actually experience burnout the most are these sneaky times where you didn't even realize that boundaries were slipping and you were staying up a little later and you weren't paying as much attention to your relationships. It's these sneaky moments on a more day-to-day basis, not these big seasons of busy.
Hey there, CEOs. My name is Brandee Gar, and my mission with this podcast is to help you, the wedding industry entrepreneur, to build a profitable wedding business that you actually love. I get so excited to come here into your ears every single week and to really push you and give you the tools and strategies you need to not just scale your business, but to scale a business that pays you a salary, that is profitable, and that gives you freedom from working 80 hours a week. Welcome to the Wedding Pro CEO podcast. Today, I am talking to Krista Marie. She is a photographer and a coach, and we are talking all about how to get back on track with your goals when maybe you've gone off course. And that can happen sometimes. It can happen either because of personal things that happen in your life or just because of overwhelm and burnout, or maybe your goals weren't quite aligned with where you wanted to go when you set them in the first place. And we're honestly just having a great open conversation about what it's like to be an entrepreneur in the wedding industry and to protect your mental health and your self-care. So I invite you to just sit back and listen to this conversation between myself and Krista Marie. And I encourage you to really think about how you can protect your own mental health and how you can build a business that you absolutely love. Let's get into it. We kind of need this episode. It's like you were so jazzed at the beginning of the year. You set all these goals. You're like jumping in both feet. And then all of a sudden, engagement season's winding down. You're exhausted. How do you keep that fire going? How do you make sure that you're building that business that's not burning you out? And so I'm super excited about this topic today. Thanks for joining us, Krista.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Before we jump too much into it, tell everybody kind of how you got started in the wedding industry. I know that you're a photographer. Can you take us on that journey a little bit of how you got here?
Yeah. So my journey with photography started back in 2010. One of my roommates in college at the time, well, like a year or two prior to that, I'd bought myself a DSLR when I turned 21. Like most 21-year-olds do. I'm going to buy myself a nice camera. And so I had a camera. I was starting to learn how to use it. My roommate in college at the time had her own photography business. She was a few years in. She was like, "Do you want a second shoot for me?" And I was like, "Sure." That sounds like a really easy way to kind of get in and see what this is all about. And so started second shooting with her. Eventually got to the point where I took on my first wedding. And then after that, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to do this. So yeah, it's been now 13 years of weddings. And in that time, I have grown my business. And since the original days of doing mostly weddings and engagements, I now also do branding photography. That's something that I'm really passionate about. But yeah, it started in college and I had no idea what I was doing. Like most people, you start a business and you're like, nobody taught me how to do this. How do I own a business and handle my finances and get clients? Yeah, it was a journey. And I had my business for about 4 years in Florida officially when I moved to California. And I had a couple of weddings that I did have to fly back for, which was fine. All my family's in Florida. I think the most challenging part for me was the market in Florida is very different from the market in the Bay Area in California.
Okay.
And so I experienced so much imposter syndrome when I moved here because even though I had 4 years of experience, the price points were higher. The scenery, I feel like in Florida, I would pride myself on finding that random corner with the beautiful light and getting really creative. And then I moved to a place where everywhere you turn around, everything was pretty. And so I just felt all this imposter syndrome. Who am I to be shooting here and taking all these pictures? My biggest advice for anyone who's transitioning to a new city, transitioning to a new state, whatever it might be, is let yourself be a bit of a beginner again, opening yourself up to how can I proactively put myself out there? What can I take on? What can I offer in exchange? What can I offer for free? And knowing that this isn't a question of your worth or how much experience you have, it's just to open up doors to get to know people. And I really had to kind of take that on a bit. As well as fight through a lot of the pricing imposter things that I was feeling. It's hard to start over.
Yeah. And, I actually have a photographer friend in our market too, who's just moved here from Chicago. And I know it's been really difficult for her. I can see how that would be hard. You're established in one market and you do just expect that you're going to move to the other market and you're going to be able to kind of play in that same ball game, or just that the business will just come. I've
Yeah.
never had to do that relocation, but I can imagine that that would be a really scary thing
Yeah,
to go through.
it was a bit of an ego check, to be honest. I mean, I was only in
Yeah.
business for 4 years, so it's not like
Yeah,
I
but
was
still.
super established, but I was booking clients regularly in Florida, and then
Right.
I had this market not only of new photographers, but everyone talks about the saturated market, but, like, the Bay Area, I feel like, was a
Yeah.
whole 'nother level for me. So, yeah, it was kind of an ego check to be like, "Okay, how can I put myself out there? How can I build these connections, build these relationships?" Because at the end of the day, that's gonna be the thing that's gonna bring people, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but that's
Yeah.
gonna be the thing that's gonna continue to bring people into your business instead of sitting back and just, like, waiting for people to come and find me is, like, how can
Yeah.
I proactively put myself out there?
So tell us a little bit about where you are now in your business. You're 13 years in. You've obviously been in California for a while. Tell us about your photography business now and then how you transitioned into education.
Yeah, in 2020, it was, like, the big shift of what am I doing in my life? Because for the first time in 10 years, I had a break and I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with myself. And to be honest, the hardest part for me was my identity for so long was a photographer. And I didn't talk
Mhm.
about this, but I worked full time for, oh my gosh, 9 years growing my business.
Yeah.
So when I was in Florida, I was still working full time. And then when I moved to California, part of the reason I was able to move and relocate was I got a job here in California. So I still had a full
Okay.
time income. That's also another mindset piece that was a big struggle for me of, am I a real photographer because I have a job? The answer is
Right.
yes, for anyone who's
Yes.
wondering that. That was a challenge for me. In 2019, I left my full time job. I was like, okay, I thought I was going to go into photography education. I thought I wanted to
Okay.
teach people the actual logistics of photography, and I was gonna get that ball rolling. So I left my full-time job with that intention, and then I did it for a couple of months, and I realized, "Ooh, this isn't it. This is not what I wanna be doing." And then 2020 hit, so it was this, like, thing after thing of crisis identity. Who am I? What am I doing? Do I even wanna be doing photography anymore? It was a question that I asked myself. I think the piece that I was missing was I wanted to teach, but I just hadn't quite figured out what. I wanted to teach people how to build a business. I wanted to do what I'm doing now, but I
Mhm.
didn't feel qualified. Even though I
Yeah.
had built a business for 10 plus years, relocated to a new market, done all of these things, like
Yeah.
I still didn't feel it was qualified to teach people. I think that's a common
Mhm.
thing for any creative who wants to get into some sort of education space. We still feel like we don't have enough credibility. That's what I wanted to be doing, but it was a slow roll. So in 2020, I launched my podcast, mostly geared for creatives and photographers. It was like coaching, but in a free way and just putting it out on the podcast. And then after about a year of that, I was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to go all in. So launched my coaching business in 2021 in the fall. And yeah, and now we're fully transitioning into that. I have a one-on-one coaching, I have group coaching, and this was a decision that was on my heart for so long, and it took a really long time for me to really kind of feel comfortable in that transition.
Well, it's interesting too that honestly, it almost takes a pandemic to even allow you the bandwidth to create a coaching
Yeah.
business, right? Like all you have is time. I love that you already knew what was on your heart and what you wanted to teach. Now you teach photographers and creatives how to build a sustainable business. Is that what
Mhm.
you teach?
Yeah, and my passion is really for the photographers and creatives that are in their first 5 years, because I think
Okay.
that's really the time that is there's levels. It's like,
Mhm.
you get those first few levels of how do I, like, build a sustainable business that doesn't burn me out? It's so easy to just throw in the towel if you feel like you don't know how to prioritize, if you're burning out, if you're overwhelmed, if you're struggling to figure out, what do I work on first? How do I be the person that makes the decisions for what I do and what I don't do and what's going to work and what's not going to work? That's, I think, where a lot of my passion is helping photographers and creatives work through all of those first few years of all the challenges.
Yeah, especially once you go from you were working full time and doing photography to now you're just doing photography. And there's this weird like balance of I'm overwhelmed, but I don't have anything to do. Like there's
Mhm.
no one telling you what to do, right?
It's just like this vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. And really, that's kind of what we're talking about today. That is what we're talking about today. Burnout, self care, like really making sure that you're allowing yourself the ability to take care of yourself as you're building your business. So, what do you feel like is one of the first things that you would tell a new business owner about how to avoid that burnout in the first place?
Yeah. I always like to let people know and kind of comfort them a little bit in knowing is that at some point you will get to a point where you feel burnt out. Because I think one of my biggest things is like, call out the elephant in the room and just know that it's probably going to happen and there's nothing wrong with you when it happens. So first things first, just know that like it's inevitable and it happens to everybody, no matter how successful or, how many years they are into their business. Know that it's okay. There are some strategies and things that you can do to help eliminate that. And that's where I think it's really important to shift your priorities and to even understand what your priorities are. Because I think a
Mhm.
lot of the times burnout comes when we have a lack of boundaries. We have a lack of understanding around what even are my priorities right now because we're trying to do everything in our business. And so, yeah, if we try to keep all balls in the air and we're trying to juggle all these things, you're going to get to a point where, oh, I can't do this anymore. So, getting really clear on, and this will probably change per season. You might have some seasons that are, you know what, right now, some of my personal things are going to kind of have to be put aside because I do have a lot of clients. I have a lot of things going on, but understanding that this is a season and I can kind of time box this as there is an end. And then when you're not in that kind of go, go, go type of season, then you can work on some of these other things of, okay, what are my boundaries? What are my priorities? How can I make sure I'm taking time and space away from my business so that I can actually grow the business and I don't feel like I'm constantly in the weeds of trying to get everything done.
Mhm. It's so good. I love that you talked about those priorities. What are your priorities? And even just knowing that, I feel like so many of us lose sight of what's
Mhm.
important. Why did I build this business in the first place? What do I want from it? Why did I leave my corporate job? Right. And I was loving that we were doing this episode today because just this morning, I got an email from a really major influencer that I love and follow. And she's leaving the industry because she was like, I thought I left my corporate job to build a business around my life. But then as my business got bigger, instead of building balance into my life and protecting those priorities, I ended up just building a bigger hamster wheel. And she's like, now I just have to run so hard to keep the machine going that I've totally lost sight of like any semblance of who I was or why I started this business. And she's literally closing her whole business. I was like,
Ugh.
what? And I think that happens a lot to us in the wedding industry. So I think if you don't even know what your priorities are, then you just keep running because you're like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think that that's a
Yeah.
really major piece of the puzzle is defining that in the first place.
Yeah, those priorities and those boundaries, they slip. A lot of the time I find for me when burnout happens, it's not this big monumental. It's often actually not even the busiest seasons. And I say that because I prepare and know that busy seasons are coming. And I will stay up late, I will edit photos, I will
Mhm.
call, I will do the things I need to do. The times I actually experience burnout the most are these sneaky times where you didn't even realize that boundaries were slipping and you were staying up a little later and you weren't paying as much attention to your relationships. It's these sneaky
Mhm.
moments on a more day-to-day basis, not these big seasons of busy. And so I think, yeah, it's so important, like you said, to identify what your boundaries are. And also just for that awareness to then start to see, oh, you know what, this has been slipping. Oh, I have
Mhm.
noticed that this is, and then you can kind of correct that ahead of time as opposed to waiting for that shoe to drop fully and then being like, "Oh, I guess I missed this big
Yeah.
thing that was right in front of me the whole time."
Yeah. Like once you realize, okay, the wheels fell off, like let's get it all
Mhm.
put back together. What are those steps that you can take, or what are some of the tips that you can give us for getting back on track?
Yeah, I have a few that I'll share, and then I have one thing I kinda wanna end with, which just kind of
Yeah.
encapsulates all of them, and I feel like is the biggest takeaway, but, I mean, the first things first, again, I think is acceptance, and that I think it's more than just the acceptance of, "Oh, okay, I'm going to experience burnout." It's true acceptance and love of yourself of, "I
Mhm.
let this fall, for whatever reason, these things slipped out from under me, but not making it mean anything more about yourself, not
Mhm.
making it mean that you're a bad person, a bad wife, a bad partner, a bad business owner. Like all of the stories that come along with that is so like accepting that burnout is here and also still loving and accepting yourself in this moment doesn't mean anything
Yes.
about you. Also, just knowing your triggers, I mean, I think is so important, right? Know the places that you start to feel that overwhelm or not enoughness? Is it in Facebook groups? Is it certain people in your life? Whatever it is that you might find yourself letting yourself fall into. Also finding someone that you can talk to and someone that you can really talk to honestly because I think that, we have people who really care about us and love us, but it's hard to talk about burnout with someone who
Mhm.
doesn't quite understand the feeling. And
Yes.
finding someone who can just kind of be there with you and sit with you, not try to fix it, not try to tell you, "Oh, you're doing great," but really just kinda hold that space for you to
Mhm.
process those feelings, whether that's you go to a professional like a therapist or a coach or just another business owner who can just sit with you in that and be like, I get it.
Mhm.
It's hard. And then two like kind of tactical things is relieve yourself of any of the pressures and the deadlines that you had already set. So if you were like, next
Mhm.
month, I'm going to do this and this and this, scratch all of that off your calendar and start again from the beginning because clearly what you had planned was not working. And just find some things that you can consume, whether that's podcasts, whether it's books, something that you can just let yourself be immersed in and enjoy and just do something for yourself
Mhm.
that'll help you give you the space to build yourself back up to where you can then get back into business mode. Like business mode will happen again, but give yourself time and space to be able to get back to it.
Yes. Oh, that's a good one too. And this is kind of a funny aside, but my husband says that he thinks that my stress level or like my imposter syndrome comes the fastest when he can see me like watching Shark Tank all the time, or I'll listen to how I built this. I'm like listening to all these business things and I love it. I
Yes.
genuinely am like, this is so fun. I love watching these stories. And he's like, yeah, except when that's all you're consuming, you're like, well, why aren't we, selling a multi-trillion
Mhm.
dollar business or, like all these things? And he's like, I think you need to give yourself the space to like listen to junk. Like you need to like, watch the Kardashians or something. I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah, it's so true. I did a similar thing where I love going on walks. Part of my grounding practice now is going on walks, but at the time
okay.
I was going on walks, but I was listening to podcasts all about how to build. So I was like
Yep.
doing my walks, but then yeah, I mean I specifically remember I listened to one all about a challenge. And then I got home from my walk and all of a sudden I've got a note full of things about how I need to make this challenge because it's going to be the thing that's going to, like
Right.
really take off and yeah, I noticed that on a regular basis of, oh, we've got to stop that. We've got to and I think that's a common thing though. We're so ambitious in building our business. We want to learn, we want to try new things,
Yeah.
but we get so used to looking outside for how we can
Mhm.
grow that we completely tune out from our own inner intuition. Like we know deep down things that we can do that'll feel good to help us grow our business, but we don't trust in those things enough yet. So we
Mhm.
listen to other people to help them tell us what we should do. But that's just like you said, it just puts you on this hamster wheel of go, 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 doing all these things.
Yes, yes, and always constantly trying to keep up with the person that's like, 3
Mhm.
steps ahead of you, which can that I feel like alone can lead to burnout right there. It's like it's great to have somebody to push you, but it's also a little bit like, okay, I need to, run my own race a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
I would just ask too, I know that like you were just talking about, okay, so the business side will always be there, and that's obviously so true. But what about when I've given myself that break and I had all these goals and now I need to get back on track with my goals? Do you have any tips for us if you gave yourself the break? Now, here you've got to get back into it to make
Mm.
sure that you're meeting those goals, or do you just throw them out the window and start over, which is a possibility
Yeah.
too, I guess?
I think there's two ways that I think about this. The first thing is again, are these goals clients or contracts or things that you are currently doing, right? So
Right.
of course don't throw those things out the window. If you've given yourself a little bit of a break and you still are taking on certain clients and certain sessions, of course still put yourself back into that. I used to struggle with having a plan for my week. And so what would
Mhm.
end up happening is I would end up spending really late nights editing or doing all the work that I was needing to be doing because I didn't realize I was trying to put too much into my
Mhm.
weeks. And it wasn't until I found a method where I could actually write out every single day, here are the things that I'm going to do and broken down into the smallest tasks. I think as photographers, I've seen this so often with clients is, you know, do so and so's wedding or like their task is like do this. And I'm like,
Yes.
That you're never gonna cross that off because it's like, are you expecting that in one sitting you're gonna call, edit, send the sneak peeks? Like, no. So, like, making sure that
Mhm.
you actually break down, okay, today, my only goal, I'm gonna call. I'm gonna go through the
Yep.
photos, and if I can do that, great, then I can move on. Figure out a way to really drill down into, like, what is possible for me to do today so that I don't, again, go back into that overwhelm cycle where I'm trying to cross off this one task, but this one task is actually 12 hours of work. But then also, sometimes we overconsume and then we want to do all these things in our business. So there
Mhm.
are some goals that I think we do need to either park or just revisit at another time. I know at one point in the beginning of 2021, I had this lofty goal of how I was going to blog and put pins up every day. And like I had all of these marketing things that were just on my list because they were things that were grow my business.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, I got burned out after like 2 months of trying to do all of it. And so I had to park some of it. I only just recently, literally in the last 2 months, now a year and a couple months later, I'm now creating an actual doable Pinterest strategy. So it depends on the goal, but I think there might be some goals that you might need to, maybe you don't throw them out, but you park them for a bit and you wait until you actually have a strategy where you can implement it in a way that feels really good.
Yes, that's so good. I think everything you just said is so important. I love the tip of like, don't say, you know, do so and so's wedding. It's so true that if you don't break it down, not only do you not realize how long it's going to take and how many steps are involved, but it's so defeating that you could go like a whole week and
Mhm.
still not be able to cross
Still
that
not crossed off
off,
that
right?
one task. How many times and that was something I found with my planner is if I've still got a task on Monday, then it's Thursday or
Oh,
Friday and that hasn't gotten crossed off, it helps me keep myself kind of check every single week because, okay, this didn't get done. Why? And then I can really get down as to, am I actually not excited to do it? Is there a lot of
yeah.
resistance? If there is resistance, why? Like, is this actually something I should be spending? So I think you actually gain a lot of insight when you take time to really clearly write things down and then check yourself every week of,
Mhm.
interesting, this was a priority and I didn't do it. What can I learn
Yeah.
from that? Like, kind of dig into that a little bit.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Okay, Krista, you coach both photographers and creatives, or is your program really more for photographers, do you feel like?
I have photographers and I have course creators. So I kind of
Okay.
bucket
Yeah.
myself into photographers or creatives. I do find that with one-on-one clients, I do find a lot of photographers come to me just because that is my
Yeah.
background. It's something I'm very comfortable and familiar with as far as helping to coach them around. But my one-on-one coaching can be either, my group coaching also can be either. We really talk about these foundational things of how do I build a sustainable business. So it's not so
Yeah.
much focused just on one industry. It's really starting to building these practices around creating a business that you still enjoy and that you can continue working on without feeling that overwhelm and burnout.
Yes. So good. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, Krista, where can everybody go connect with you?
Yeah, I would love that. So I do have my podcast also. You can find me at She Calls Her Shots, and I'm on Instagram at Hey Krista Marie.
Good. Oh my gosh, this was so great. Krista, I appreciate all of your insight. And you guys go say hi to Krista, connect with her, let her know you heard her on the Wedding Pro CEO podcast, and tell her thank you for being here. And Krista, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Brandee. It was a joy.